Well, speaking of the Switch 2, of course, last week we had that reveal of the Switch 2, and there have been some more rumors about potential ports that are coming over to the system. And the which ports those are ranges quite a bit. Some of them we had talked about previously, long before we actually saw the Switch 2. And there have been some new reports that have said there are games like, I'm not just Elden Ring, which we already knew about, but also, well, not just Elden Ring, not just Final Fantasy VII Remake and Rebirth that we had already talked about last week, but also Metal Gear Solid Delta Snake Eater, Grand Theft Auto 6, and Diablo 4. And I definitely have plenty of thoughts on how much I believe these rumors, but I certainly would like to hear what your thoughts are.
Yeah. Now I'll be honest. Part of this I was waiting to see what would happen because some of the games, namely Metal Gear Delta and I believe like stuff which we also mentioned before, Halo, Master Chief Collection, Microsoft Flight Simulator, coming to Switch 2, were reported by Nate the Hate, and he of course mentioned that we were gonna get a Switch 2 announcement reveal last week, and I was really waiting to see what would happen because I thought, I mean, of course, things could change, and depending on the different sources he had, some stuff might be more credible than others, but if the Switch 2 was revealed last week, which it was, then I think there's a fair chance this is happening. And I really think that, in light of what happened, Metal Gear Delta could be coming. Because the Switch 2, which while we do not have these, full specs and everything, based on what we have from the leaks and rumors, it is a capable device. So it should be able to play Metal Gear Solid Delta. And so I think that it definitely could be coming. And the same would also apply to Diablo 4 and also Grand Theft. Well, I'll say Grand Theft Auto 6. I'm going to add a small caveat to that though, because while the Switch 2 would be a more capable device, I don't know. Of course, we haven't really seen much of GTA 6. Not certain how it would perform, but with NVIDIA and possibly using DLSS, then it probably would be, might be running the game at 30 frames per second. Could possibly get something a little more, but it could be getting something pretty reasonable for what it is. But I think though, as a whole, I do see this as a possibility. I mean, considering the fact that last gen, the Nintendo Switch got games that people would not think it would be receiving, like Doom and Doom Eternal. No one would say those games would never run on a Switch, and I mean, they got them to run. Whether you think it ran well is debatable, but they got the game ported. They got those games ported over, and so I think that having a stronger device like the Switch 2 is definitely reasonable. And I mean, I think that Nintendo and the Switch have. I think Nintendo's really done a good job at marketing the Switch well enough that devs would want to port games over to their handheld. And if the Switch 2 is going to be a more powerful device or more powerful version of the original Switch, then devs would definitely say, yeah, we don't mind putting our games over here because there's something here. So I do think that it is possible that GTA 6 and Delta and Diablo 4 could come over. It's just something that, of course, we would have to wait and see. And of course, with because I don't think there is a concrete date yet for Metal Gear Solid. Has there been a set date yet?
Nothing yet.
Okay, so because of that, I think it's definitely possible. And with the Switch 2 Direct coming in April, then of course I really believe we'll actually have a good. I think we'll definitely know most, if not all, of the games that are coming out this year, and I believe that is when these games will actually be announced. Of course, along with any other titles that come out this year. But I'm pretty confident this is all true. But that is pretty much everything I have to say in summary.
Yeah, I agree with that. The one thing that like regarding Grand Theft Auto 6, because I think that one's the hardest to believe. The one thing that occurred to me as I thought about it is that Rockstar is really good at optimizing their games. The fact that Red Dead Redemption 2 runs as well as it does on the Steam Deck, I mean, that's an impressive game. It's a really good PC port. I think that they could get Grand Theft Auto 6 running on the Switch 2. And if the rumor of the Switch 2 having a 256 gigs of storage is accurate, then storage wouldn't be an issue either. Even though I do expect the game is probably going to be, well, I guess I should say, it won't be as much of an issue with storage. Because I'm going to guess that GTA 6, unless they allow you to separate multiplayer and single player, will probably be about 200 gigs. It's gonna be a massive game. Granted, if they stick to lower resolution textures on the Switch 2, then it wouldn't be nearly as large. Because a lot of these games that have the larger file sizes in the high 100s and the 200s, it's because of the 4K textures. And if they leave those completely out of the Switch version, then it would definitely significantly reduce the file size, because 4K images are just huge amount. I mean, it's a huge amount of space that it takes up. So if they leave those out, they could save a lot of space. So there's that. Now, in terms of, and we had already talked about Final Fantasy VII Remake and Rebirth last week. Based on what we've seen for the for how Remake ran on Steam Deck, I think, yeah, I absolutely believe that'll be a real thing. Rebirth seems like it runs decently on Steam Deck, and if the Switch 2 is relatively similar in power, plus utilizes DLSS, which of course is way better than FSR, I think that it could actually, I mean, it probably will run pretty similarly on the Switch 2 as how it runs on Steam Deck for that particular game. I think the one that has me in some ways having the most pause, apart from GTA 6, is Metal Gear Solid Delta Snake Eater. And the main reason I say that is because it's an Unreal Engine 5 game. So I do think that, yes, if they keep the resolution low enough, leave out the 4K textures, and utilize DLSS, they probably could get it running at 30 frames per second. But it would definitely be a downgraded version. So that one just has me kind of, I just need to see it. I know that when the earliest like leaks we had about the Switch 2 said that they were doing like that Matrix demo on the Switch 2 behind closed doors, and that was in Unreal Engine 5, so maybe it'll be reasonably doable. But of course the difference with that is that was, I think that was primarily just like pre-rendered stuff as opposed to actually being playable, but I'm not sure. So of course with Elden Ring, I'd say that's pretty much guaranteed that that'll be on Switch 2 as a complete edition, and that one I'm really curious to see, because I'm pretty happy with how Elden Ring runs on the Steam Deck, and I'm really curious to see how it's going to run on the Switch 2 whenever that happens, because I believe that one's a very, very good possibility. And Diablo 4, I'd say that's guaranteed. That's going to be on the Switch 2. It runs really well on Steam Deck. I mean, you're even running the Battle.net version, which of course you have to do a separate launcher for. You get 60 frames per second on low settings. And the Switch 2, having a native version, because I've heard actually the Steam version runs better than the Battle.net version on the Steam Deck. Having the native version they should be able to get at least a decent frame rate. I think they can at least do 30 frames per second. If they really sacrifice on the visuals more, similar to what they did with Diablo 3 on the Switch, they might be able to get 45 to 60, or at least like have an uncapped frame rate where it can do anywhere in that range rather than being a locked 60. But I don't know. Yeah, I think that I really think that these are probably all accurate, and I'm super curious how they're going to look and run on the Switch 2, if they actually do come.
Yeah, and I will say, again, we don't have any concrete evidence. But if the Switch 2 is roughly as powerful as the Steam Deck, while the graphics will be vastly different because Delta is going to have, better textures and, better lighting and stuff like that. At least as far as Unreal Engine 5 goes, the Switch 2 might be able to run it at 30, maybe 40 frames per second, just because of the fact that when I did play Palworld on my deck, it was getting up to 50 frames per second. Most of the time it was in like the higher 30s or low 40s, but it was able to run it at that frame rate. And that's also an Unreal Engine 5 game. Right. So while Metal Gear Solid Delta is going to be a more graphically impressive game, at least as far as the engine goes, at least, it can run it. It can run it. So if the Switch 2 is as powerful, if not maybe a little more powerful than a Steam Deck, and has DLSS, it could run it at a pretty stable frame rate. Yeah. So I think it could definitely be possible. Again, of course, it's the graphics that will be more intensive than Palworld's, but as far as the engine goes, it should be able to run it.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that game does have going for it, despite the fact that obviously it's going to look extremely good, especially with everything we've seen so far, is that the environments are small. It's very corridor-based in terms of the level layouts. There's only a few areas that are open-ish, and even those are not really open. Now, when adding more like foliage and all of that is definitely going to use a lot more system resources, but I could see them having a lot more pop in and then still having it work out well. So I don't know. I'm super curious about that one, especially because obviously I love Metal Gear Solid 3. I'm a huge fan of that game. I played through it 3 times in 2023, and I could easily see myself playing it again. And obviously whenever Delta comes out, assuming it's not a completely broken port on PC, I'll be playing it again for sure. But yeah, it's interesting times we live in right now when it comes to these games and this hardware and seeing what the Switch 2 is actually capable of. Obviously a big thing, we just have to wait for that April presentation and see what they show. I imagine there's going to be just a ton of game announcements. They'll probably do a little more actual explanations of what the Switch 2 can do, especially like the mouse thing I'm super curious about, because it's obvious that that's something that they showed in the trailer. We just don't know exactly how that's going to work. Quick side note on that, though. One of the videos that I came across, I didn't get a chance to watch it, but it was just, a theory from someone based on the mouse thing, is the idea of using the mouse controls for Metroid Prime 4, which would make aiming amazing. Well, assuming that the thing is easy enough to hold. I mean, those Joy-Cons, the new Joy-Cons are definitely bigger than the old ones, but for big hands, it still might be a challenge unless they have some kind of shell that you can attach to it that would make it easier to grip. But But I would happily play a Metroid game with a mouse. That would be fantastic for aiming. So. But yeah. I think that's about all I have on thoughts for that. Do you have any others?
No, sir.